Super Mario Bros. Wonder was universally praised for elevating the once stale new series into a modern revolution of two-dimensional Mario games. For many players, it's not only the best 2D entry in the series, but possibly one of the greatest platformers in general, which could be used as the breeding ground for similar franchises. Despite the fact Kirby just started his promising career with 3D gameplay, there is no reason to assume 2D entries are out of touch, thanks to Return to Dream Land Deluxe proving there is space for different dimensions. This is why it's time to revolutionize 2D Kirby just as much as Mario did and take a look at some ideas Kirby could get inspired by. All of this should not suggest Kirby desperately needs a revision and is worse than Mario, but simply take some options into consideration that feel a little lacking in the main 2D series. When we first saw the trailer for Super Mario Bros. Wonder, it became immediately clear how much attention to detail went into the overall presentation, with all its detailed, striking colors and most importantly, the animations. While Mario appeared like a plastic toy in the new series, missing any kind of charm in his expressions, Wonder flipped the coin completely, with distinct animations for moments we haven't even thought about, like entering a warp pipe or showing emotions whenever jumping on an enemy's head. The same goes for enemies themselves, with Goombas and especially the new foes being way more expressive than you would expect. Although the creators do their absolute best in demonstrating Kirby's cute side, I always felt like the general animations are only serviceable for what we expect. Back in the day, after conquering each world, little cutscenes would present some moments of Kirby's adventure, often comedic or simply charming, and add to the overall comfy tone the series tries to convey. Unfortunately, these are gone with time, and while they technically do not appear during gameplay, you could argue sprite-based Kirby games might portray a little more charisma in the animations. A modern equivalent I welcome, and some players may not even be aware of, are taunts you can perform by pressing the D-pad into different directions. Considering how Return to Dream Land Deluxe added the feature as well after Forgotten Land introduced it, it's safe to say it will stay, giving Kirby more character and expression. Another perfect example is Mario 3D World and Odyssey. Although there are moments where Mario shows expressions in 3D World, there's no denying how much bouncier Nintendo's mascot appears in Odyssey. So far, I feel like Kirby's between 3D World and Odyssey, having situations of charm, but not committing to them so that people will clearly notice it. Forgotten Land, however, is a promising first step, seeing how Kirby watches the world he finds himself in or suddenly jumps back to hold the elevator from closing. To make it clear, Kirby already consistently tries to experiment with the visuals. Forgotten Land borrows a somewhat realistic look, ironically similar to Odyssey, while Return to Dream Land Deluxe manifests a colorful, fresh look, instead of plainly reusing Star Allies graphics, despite the fact it would have looked pleasing as well, while being less costly probably. It's not about fixing a problem, but try to push already excellent limits. I'm not asking for Kirby to speak, or cry, or go over the top, but simply add those small appreciated touches everyone praises in Wonder. When I was first playing Wonder and watching the promotional material before, it was clear we would deviate from classic Mario settings in favor for more quirky places. What I did not expect, however, is the general structure the adventure follows. Starting with grassy fields is the bread and butter for the series, but after 3 levels, the true process of progress can be seen. Often there is no order in which you can tackle those levels, and at a certain point in the game, you can even choose the next world you want to explore on your own. Naturally, it's not completely open and there are some restrictions in how you proceed, but does this remind you of something? Star Allies features a fairly similar structure, obviously not the same, but close enough to make a comparison. While the first world is colored by grassy environments, World 2 and 3 already play with some themings to shake things up, only to find yourself in World 4, with countless levels to be completed in the order you wish. What I enjoy about this specific sense of escalation is how each world slightly loses the chains of the genre by playing with regulations we thought were set. Chapter 1 does nothing you haven't seen before. Chapter 2 focuses each course on one clear setting, normally dedicated for a whole world. Chapter 3 feels like one big continuous level, and Chapter 4 closes it with complete player freedom. This, however, is not the norm, and especially after Return to Dream Land Deluxe, which admittedly is a remake of a game released over 10 years ago, it feels rather plain to return to standard platformer environments. We have have seen a million times. You may argue they could go for utter freedom by letting you choose the order of worlds by yourself, but it's not necessary. With an approach like Mario Wonder, you can introduce necessary mechanics in the first half of the game, guiding the player and making sure he will see everything he needs to know, before juggling more creative concepts in the second half. Similarly, by marking each level with a difficulty indicator, there is some jiggle room for the creators to develop harder courses in the early parts, without having to wait until post-game, since those levels would be optional for beginners. Following my videos, it should be clear how much a fan I am seeing King DDD being some kind of villain. While he does not need to carry seriously malicious motives, it doesn't hurt to bring the king back to his original position of a selfish, light-hearted antagonist, similar to Battle Royale or Fighters 2. Looking at Bowser, there was a slight change in characterization many people might not have even noticed. Back in the day, you always encountered the ruler of the Koopas at a fiery palace with minor exceptions. 3D World played with those expectations by placing the climax on an amusement park, while Odyssey let you crash Bowser's own wedding. Without spoiling too much, Mario Wonder took one step further into this direction by proposing the idea of Bowser having an alternative career as a showmaster. He's still the same villain we know from over 30 years ago, but there's no denying Nintendo experiments with their most iconic villain from time to time, without changing his basic core too much. I would like to see the same treatment for DDD, but obviously altered to fit Kirby. If you ask me, there wasn't much characterization going on in the last year, with DDD being the sloppy rival with a good heart. The Forgotten Land gave him one memorable moment, and perhaps this is a sign to explore Kirby's first villain beyond aging possession plots. Take one distinct trait of the king and exaggerate it, give him a quirky, stupid motive to create entertaining chaos, and it will be just as enjoyable as many world-ending monstrosity we normally receive. We talked about the level structure of Kirby and Mario, but missed out on the opportunity to mention the levels themselves. Comparing the very first Kirby's Dream Land with Adventure, there's a distinct difference in level design. Dream Land presents relatively long, continuous sections with unlike situations, whereas Adventure builds itself up like a traditional 2D side-scroller, therefore offering multiple levels per world. As a result, it may appear like there's more to Adventure, but it's generally a fluke to create the illusion of a packed adventure. Obviously, Adventure is longer than Dream Land, but fundamentally it just splits the long continuous levels of Dream Land into shorter pieces, justifying the whole level selection screen. One downside coming from this approach is the level design itself, becoming incredibly simplistic without any special moments happening. Part of the reason are the newly introduced copy abilities, which make certain situations quite enjoyable, like the wheelie or butter building appearing a little more elaborated or more akin to Dream Land. I'm not implying a serious misstep from Adventure's side, but this trend kinda ran through the whole franchise for some games, with the recent return to Dream Land Deluxe ironically inspired by Adventure, further underlining this dilemma. Again, there are a couple memorable individual levels, but exceptions prove the rule, and Star Allies already showed signs of repetition in its level design too. The very same was said about the new Super Mario Bros. Series. While the first title started rather tame to reintroduce classic two-dimensional Mario gameplay to a modern playstyle, it was quite disappointing to see how each follow-up barely involved the once triumphant return to older days. Just like with Kirby, it's very hard to recall specific levels that stood in your mind, until Wonder changed that fact and did an amazing job in improving on creativity. Think of the Wiggler chasing sequences, music levels, and even castles try to upheave themselves from standard fire settings. While rather classic, many levels take place in environments fresh for the series, and just like with every other point so far, I would love to see the same for Kirby. Epic Yarn, for instance, did a fantastic job in offering memorable ideas, often playing with the given setting to such an extent it doesn't become outlandish but in tone for the franchise. World 2, for example, takes place in a desert environment at first, but brings you to a volcano or dinosaur landscape instead. The worlds are not based around a setting, but theming instead, and although it isn't like Kirby completely flaws in that aspect, Wonder was a fitting reminder how much a little creativity can do for staying unforgettable. There's no denial Kirby perfectly adapted the controls of the past into the future by fine-tuning copy abilities to such an extent it's hard to imagine how much there is to improve. Forgotten Land was critiqued for this very fact, since everyone was used to executing elaborated moves, accessible for beginners while complex enough for veterans. However, this only applies to copy abilities and not base Kirby. It makes sense to hold back Kirby's basic movement options in order to encourage the player to inhale skills, but it's not uncommon for people to try out no copy ability runs. There's even the argument to make that some bosses are designed around that or more enjoyable without abilities in mind, and the best Kirby games were always those who handled both playstyles fair enough. Even older titles, especially the GBA era, felt much more flexible thanks to the quick pace of the controls, despite the fact there was also not much to perform. The fan game Kirby and the Eternal Paradise builds on that flexible blueprint with some notable changes, making the controls and general feel of Kirby incredibly dynamic and modern. As Mario Wonder shows, they don't have to change Kirby's base controls completely, however. Badges manipulate the character's abilities with one additional move besides their classic set: gliding through the air Rayman style, swimming faster underwater, performing a high jump, running excessively fast, and many more. The badge system allows the creators to play with different ideas, without making it a core part of Mario's moveset and build specific levels around them. Even so, the best part about them is not necessarily the potential for a more complex level design. Since they are optional, it's not like the developers can design mandatory courses, assuming not everyone will use them, which can be a downside. But some players like to forget, not everything has to have a serious purpose. Sometimes it's just more enjoyable to have an additional glide to your arsenal or increase your speed. Mario Odyssey doesn't require you to perform all those wacky techniques you see from experienced players, since the game simply gives you a goal and the tools to reach that goal. How you want to approach it is up to you though. Surprisingly enough, Return to Dream Land Deluxe indeed features one similar exception, which is so random you might wonder why they even implemented it. Masks were added as an additional bonus in the remake, giving you more means to simply individualize the playthrough. Yet, there's one mask to make a notable change. Kain's face and his wife's allow you to spit out stronger bubbles underwater, extremely useful in World 3, taking place in those environments. Masks could have fulfilled a similar role as badges, granting Kirby smaller adjustments to his basic skills. But unfortunately, I can only assume such a concept was either scrapped or implemented in the last second. For Kain's disguise, whatever they were experimenting with, it's a welcoming addition and could seriously enhance the enjoyment by simply giving players some means to customize the way they like to run through the game. But these are only a handful of features I enjoyed in Mario Wonder, so please comment on stuff you were impressed by and would like to see in a future 2D Kirby title.